Hello, everyone. Ian Hamilton with Good Virtual Reality here. In case you're new, you can become a subscriber at goodvirtualreality.com. Many episodes of this podcast head out over email first to paid subscribers before publishing everywhere to your podcast platform of choice. Thank you to my founding members and paid subscribers for supporting the production of this independent journalism directly. Today, I'm joined by Russ Harding at Maze Theory. Where are you tuning in from today, Russ?
Hi, just outside London, actually, on a grey UK day.
And why don't you tell everyone what your most recent project is and what you do at Maze Theory?
Yeah, sure. So my most recent project is Project Hail Mary, Journey Amongst the Stars. I'm the Chief Creative Officer at Maze, and that means that I get to spend a lot of my time working with the team on everything from the concept development all the way through to the final delivery of any of our games and experiences.
Awesome. I've watched Project Hail Mary 4 times now. It's the best sci-fi film of the year. Just an incredible movie. I'll have to share this at some point during this conversation, so I might as well just say it now. My last viewing was in VR with a friend of mine here in the area who also has a Vision Pro. I was begging him to go out to the theater to see it. He couldn't make it to the theater. Finally, his schedule cleared, and we were able to boot it up on our headsets at our homes. Both of us reclined in our own beds, brought up the movie up at like a 45-degree angle up there, widescreen, very large. And I turned the environment on my Vision Pro to Jupiter. So I was on Jupiter for the entirety of the movie. And I have to share this because it was so amazing. I'd never quite done this way before. I'm on a moon around Jupiter, orbiting Jupiter. The sun is there just about to peek out behind Jupiter and become night. And then I'm watching Project Hail Mary for the full 2.5 hours while the sun slowly makes its way behind the planet and then pops out the other side. And almost a full day passed on Jupiter out there as I was watching the movie, and my cat cuddled up next to me, and it was just an incredible experience to watch it again. And I just wanted to share that for anyone who doesn't have a Vision Pro out there, that co-watching a movie in there is still a delightful experience. I want to hear about what we're going to be able to do in this mixed reality experience on Quest headsets. So what can you share about what the experience is going to entail on Quest?
It's going to be a mixed reality experience. It's quite interesting because we started our journey with Hail Mary, I suppose, 18 months, 2 years ago. So before we had any visual information on the film itself, we'd read the books and we were talking to MGM about the film. It felt like it was a very natural, immersive event. It felt very much like the role of Ryland Grace was a very physical role, and it felt something that fit really naturally into something like a mixed reality experience where you could have real one-to-one with some of the sort of like engineering and the mechanics and the physicality of it. So I guess for us, one of the things we're trying to get across is that kind of feeling of one-to-one interaction and being able to problem solve and companionship with Rocky. And we really want to build on that feeling that you get from the film, that companionship that sits between Ryland Grace and Rocky.
I played Starship Home, and that's a mixed reality experience where a ship sort of overtakes your home and you can collect different things and visit different parts of your room. Why don't you tell me whether there's any similarities there or any differences with what you're doing with Project Hail Mary?
I think there's a few similarities in the sense that obviously we place you in Project Hail Mary on the ship in your room. We also really, I suppose, really want to build on the physicality of placing you in your own space. We use a lot of hand interaction. I guess that connectivity between Ryland Grace, who will be you, and Rocky, and how together you work together and collaborate in that space and some other areas as well.
It's really interesting to think, since you mentioned you read the books first and had a while before you could actually see or use the assets from the movie. Ryan Gosling kind of took this character over. If I go and read the book now after watching the movie, I'm going to have Ryan Gosling in my head as the model for this character. VR kind of lets you stand in the shoes of this character in a very real way. So like you get some more leeway in letting the player become this character in a way that's kind of similar to book reading. What are the biggest challenges in adapting a book into VR and while also having to sort of honor the movie depiction of it?
I think it's really about being able to place people in that role. It's very much like giving them the tools and some of the prompts. And I think really the book's really about human connection with another species, being Rocky, and building those relationships. And I think that's what's really unique about the immersive side of MR or VR product, is in the sense you can really place players in that role and they really take it on board. And I think when you have a character as strong as Rocky by your side as well, I think it really helps you lean into it. I mean, interestingly enough, I think Ryland Grace was Ryan Gosling in my mind. When he got on the movie, it felt like a very natural translation. And I think I think it's interesting to see what players bring themselves, really.
It's such a beautiful movie for sort of drawing out the human spirit of companionship and cooperation and exploration. All those things gives you quite a lot of playroom for mixed reality. So I can't wait to see how it all comes together. Do you have any inkling of when this is going to release? Can you give any hint to our audience out there of what your expectations are?
It's certainly going to be to the end of this year.
So why don't you tell us first about Maze Theory and some of the other work you've done there?
I suppose May series has been going since 2018. It really started with a pitch. It was a group of three people, really, that daringly got introduced to the BBC and to the Doctor Who IP owners. And Marcus Morby, who was the designer at the time, created a really small VR demo on an old HTC Vive with sensors pinned up around the room. And we managed to get some of the team from the BBC to come over and try it. And then we took a famous episode called Blink, which is where the Weeping Angels come into play. And it worked so perfectly in VR. It just captured their imaginations. And yeah, we kind of won the opportunity to sort of like develop the game, which at that time was quite interesting because there were only three of us. So Maze built out a lot of developers that were quite experienced, that had like moved into freelance, and we pulled this project together very, very quickly, and spent the next year figuring out what a Doctor Who experience was going to feel like and be like in VR, whilst also working with the showrunners, which was a great opportunity to really get into sort of like creating our own story and narrative to fit the medium. And I think that's pretty much something that we've always stuck with at Maze Theory, in the sense of being able to step into those worlds and create a story for the medium, but strongly, respect and work with the IP holders, and wherever possible, work directly with the original writers to make it feel as authentic as possible. And from Doctor Who, we moved into Peaky Blinders with exactly that same sort of like approach. Again, it was a world that we really loved. It was very immersive. People were getting dressed up and living the life, and people were getting the haircuts. And we just felt like it was a place you really wanted to be and experience and be present in. And again, we were fortunate enough to work with Stephen Knight and the team in creating a story for VR. Fortunately, there's some nice gaps in between the series, so we took a couple of years in between one of those series, and as part of the authenticity, we cheekily asked that Cillian Murphy, take on the role and really do the voice talent. And we managed to get him to agree. Again, just sort of like adding to that sort of like presence. We felt it was really important that you met Tommy face to face and with Arthur. So I guess that's sort of like continued. And then again with Hail Mary is working with Andy Weir in sort of like developing a narrative that fits within the present book and film. And also having the privilege of working with the film team as well.
Yeah, it's such a well realized film, and all those projects are, gosh, there's so much role play that can be explored across all of those projects it's such a rich place for it. Let's go back a little bit further too. How did you first get introduced to VR in the first place? What did you first hear about it, or what was your first interaction?
So I suppose I was introduced to it many, many years ago whilst at PlayStation. So I worked on a product many years ago called iToy, I don't know if anyone remembers iToy, but iToy was a camera-based game for PlayStation 2, where you interacted with augmented objects and, played mini games, and it's very much like a Wii Sports. And while we were developing that, PlayStation 3 came along and we started playing with augmented reality, and we started to look into sort of like early versions of headsets. It's probably before DK1, but I didn't really get involved with it, but got very much involved with augmented reality and immersive storytelling, and we're working on things like iPet and Wonderbook, the Book of Spells. So I guess that was a big tranche into IP and working on something unique by working with J.K. Rowling and her team. We had an R&D department that we worked with on iToy that worked on all the camera-based technologies, and we were looking at various head tracking devices. Then we started to look at sort of like, well, what would a VR tracking device look like? What would a fully immersive tracking device look like? And then team up in the Midlands, a research team, stuck a couple of move controllers on the headset. I think there's even some famous pictures of Shuhei Yoshida trying it on. And I think that was the first time I'd really thought about creating immersive experiences in a fully realized commercial headset. And
Wow.
then,
So that was pre-Morpheus, right? You
yeah,
were
yeah,
trying yeah.
pre-Morpheus. Yeah, we've been looking at tracking markers on glasses and all sorts to do one-to-one head tracking and controlling your view on the screen. There'd been quite a bit of R&D going on and playing around. I mean, that was the great thing with iToy, was we got to just play with augmented mechanics, which was probably around about the time. So Morpheus, I think we were asked to create the announcement demo. I think I could say it was like we had 6 months to create a demo for Morpheus, which had no hardware. It had no controllers, no control input. And we had a DK1 that we could try virtual reality, but obviously didn't really run on PlayStation. And we had a demo at GDC in the March, which is where they were going to announce Project Morpheus. We had to come up with a demo that captured everything that we felt about VR at that time. And I suppose the biggest thing was just like immersion and presence were new words.
Yeah. Wow. So what was in that original demo? Because I only have my first sort of interaction with PlayStation VR in my head. I can't remember if it was at that GDC or maybe the next year, whenever it was much closer to launch, and there was
Yeah.
that whole set of sort of mini games that came out.
Yeah, yeah. So it was one of those. So it's the deep. So very early on, we did a shark demo. So we announced with the shark demo, because we had no physical interaction, we wanted to take people through an immersive journey. And we put you in a shark cage, and basically you kind of descended through the beautiful ocean surroundings of the coral reef and seeing fish. And we only had look at triggers that we could really activate. So wherever you looked, it triggered an animation and brought something to life. And as you floated down past the manta rays, you realized you got down to this dark ship. And interestingly enough, the reason we had it was a sunken submarine actually. Sub there was that we had to put human scale back into the scene because of the drop off in the depth from the Morpheus headset, and we had to give something that gave you some kind of sense of scale. So it had to have sort of like chairs or ladders or something familiar that we could kind of like, that people could reference. And then we had the world's biggest shark, because it was definitely over 25 foot, come charging at you in the cage and ripping the door off. And actually just seeing the reaction of people, we had people running into walls at the event, where they're trying to get away from it. It really sort of like brought home how deeply you can kind of like lose people in these worlds. I suppose a bit of the responsibility of putting people in these worlds too.
Mm, that's wonderful. I remember the Blue. I got a lot of the Blue down there. That was my first Vive demo. What was it, 2015? Was getting to do that whale experience where you come eye to eye with the whale as it goes by your ship. And I had obviously done a bunch of things before that, but also just the freedom to walk around in that first demo was really fantastic. And I guess there's a lot of questions that are sparked by hearing this journey from you a little bit, but I want to hear about your favorite moment of presence in a headset that you've ever had. Is there a single memory of being in a headset that comes to mind?
I suppose, I don't know if it was present so much, but it was probably more now. Like, so I really loved the invisible hours. It was one of the things that I really loved, the ambition of it. I don't know if you've played the invisible hours, but I suppose I'm a narrative guy, so it's one that really fascinated me.
That's the one where they can float between through this mansion and go to hear different parts of this story from different perspectives, right?
It's yeah, it was really interesting from a VR perspective is being able to take on different perspectives at different times. I really loved that idea. So for me,
Mm.
that was sort of like probably one of the ones that stuck out to sort of
Yeah,
like,
I think the creative person behind that, I thought, bought back the rights to it so they could do more things with it, if I could recall
yeah,
correctly.
probably, yeah, the,
Um,
original writer.
yeah, I can't wait to see what comes of that project because it was so impactful for so many people out there. So now I want to come back to the the near present and what you're working on now. What is it about this technology that sort of convinced you to spend a large section of your career on it? It's been a difficult journey in this space to some extent, right?
Yeah.
Uh, People have expected the market to be very different than it has turned out to be. The platform holders have changed their levels of support in various ways over the years. And I guess I'm just, from a personal perspective, what hooked you on it or kept you at it this long?
It's not the easiest area to be in development for sure, from all perspectives. I'm caught up in the magic of, I suppose it goes back to when I fell in love with video games. I'm quite old. So, like, I used to have to go to an arcade to play any video game, Space Invaders or any of those old, Pac-Mans and the old, just very basic games. And then I suppose when 3D graphics became achievable, it just absolutely drew me in. It was just what I wanted to do as a passion was to make games and create worlds and places and people that people will meet, and just seeing how the industry grew and became really attached. I got really interested in how each new technology allowed you to create new immersive experiences. And I suppose the translation of that technology and finding new ways to utilize it and use it and allow people to use their imagination. And I guess VR really caught me because having worked in augmented reality with things like Wonderbook, where you bring to light, you take a physical book and you bring it to life, and and you see people really lose themselves in that experience and how magical it is. I just found that VR was, constantly is constantly evolving. I suppose there's always a new technology, a new way of expressing an idea. And I'm a bit of a glutton for punishment, I guess, for wanting to try out the new stuff. So, for me, it's just a continuing journey in creating experiences, new ways to experience things and try things. I suppose ultimately it's almost gone round table. So where I started looking at augmented reality, and we loved the accessibility of it. So, iToy's success was you didn't need to pick up a controller. You just jumped around in front of the camera, and suddenly PlayStation as a console was accessible to everyone in the room. SingStar was another accessible format, allowing people to enjoy the console in different ways. I see very much to the sort of like progression of hand tracking and MR and eye tracking, and the new headsets has been part of that progression. It's much more accessible. It's easier to put something on someone's head and just let them go and pick up an object. I mean, I say it's easy. It's not actually easy to do at all, but it's accessible. It allows more people to experience and different forms of entertainment and gaming. I suppose it's the accessibility that's become really attractive to me now.
Interesting. There's a lot to talk about there. That was a very in-depth answer. I've been playing Retrocade on the Apple Vision Pro, and it's a really fantastic piece of software from Resolution Games for Apple Arcade. And what I find most fascinating about it is how different it is from the implementation back with Oculus Arcade. So that was a very early project over on, I think it was Gear VR, and I remember finding like a ROMs folder that they would put the ROMs inside of. But if you think about the differences of 10 years of development there, you basically um, he had something that tried to be an arcade, but it had to sort of lock you into all of these restrictions that you're kind of alluding to here. These things that were, I guess, aspects of the technology of the time. And then you go forward to the way it's represented in retrocade. And it's fascinating because the thing that matters there with the arcade experience, when you're looking down at the cabinet, you need the cabinet screen to be at its absolute best, and that's where your mind is going during that time you're playing in an arcade. And so in retrocade, you can either like set up the arcade cabinet to be sort of one-to-one height and actually represented with its real cabinet sort of physicality standing in front of you, or you can just sort of pop the screen out of the cabinet and take it into whatever environment you want. So back out to Jupiter, like I've mentioned, is one of my favorite places to take Pac-Man. And then I'm reclining on my couch with my cat laying on my chest, purring into my chest. And the cat is technically between me and my arcade screen, between me and my Pac-Man, but I can't see the cat because I'm in VR there on Jupiter and it's a virtual screen and I've got a gamepad in my hands. And I'm still playing Pac-Man out there on Jupiter. And I'm even seeing the Pac-Man ghosts reflected in the sort of metal border surrounding the screen and giving me that just little sense of immersion or
Mm.
sense of like I'm actually playing that arcade cabinet that you're referring to, even though it's disambiguated from everything else about arcades. I don't have to stand at the arcade cabinet. I don't have to be at a certain height. The arcade cabinet is now like coming to me. I think that's the amazing thing to me is like the best things that you want out of an experience can come to you. And so like I've played Pac-Man and I've watched Project Hail Mary both in the exact same scenario, which is sort of
Interesting.
in this 45-degree angle, laid back situation. And it's still wild to me, like that, even that is quite, how do I frame this? Like, it's really interesting to hear you talk about iToy and this camera-based experience and the idea that like it's so accessible. This idea of looking over at a TV and having the experience reflected back at you and not having to put on a headset. And then here's kind of the opposite end of that. You got to put on a headset and trust your entire reality to a bunch of devs you've never met and try to enjoy your time. But like, I find this fascinating over the years where like some experiences like Pistol Whip or Beat Saber will invite you to get up off your butt and really get active and move around and experience. Half-Life Alyx, you can move around quite a bit, but you spend 2 hours there and you kinda wanna sit down and keep playing the game in a more relaxed scenario. I'm jumping all over the board here with referring to the way VR has evolved over the last decade. But what I think the takeaway that I'm trying to convey you've got a VR headset that has complete control over your reality. And that means that like it's the opposite end of an experience like the iToy experience that you're talking about, where you still have complete access to your reality, but you're living inside of what you see represented on that screen over there. In a VR headset, like you need to have a really compelling reason to put on that headset, and you have to have a really compelling reason to stay there and continue at it for hours on end. And not to mention just the discomfort of the headsets and how heavy they are makes it tremendously difficult for software to kind of keep that illusion going or and keep you immersed there for a long time. So I'm just that it's endlessly fascinating to me that like we're a decade into this journey, more than a decade into this journey of consumer VR. We're 30 or 40 years into the idea that virtual reality is a place you can go. And we're still probably scratching the surface of exactly how to keep people immersed for extended periods of time and enjoying their trip. What do you think are the biggest problems to solve for immersion and long-term use of headsets?
I think it's pretty boring. It's probably things like battery power, like how many times you pick up a headset, you have to charge it, then you have to put it on, moment gone. Like you say, the weight, and I think the amount of usage, like I think, those of us that got Apple Vision Pros probably pretty invested in it, but do find multiple uses for it. I think the difference is at the moment it's not at that point where I can pick up a very light, small headset. I can place it on. I can put it down when someone's at the door, or I don't have to think about charging it anymore. I don't have to think about the weight of it anymore. Um, it's that real pick up and play. I think it very much rests in the hardware. At the same
Mm,
time, I think the hardware's advanced incredibly quickly, though it may appear slowly to some. I don't think that, there are two ends of the scale now moving towards each other. You've got, all of the spatial sort of like latest headsets from Google and Pico and maybe one day Meta. You've got the glasses from the bottom coming up. For me, it's still an emerging market, and I think the experiences will expand in this next generation of headsets. And I think the economics around the headsets for producing content outside of gaming will become more viable as well.
yeah, I love that and totally agree on multiple things there that you said. I wear a shoulder bag a lot of the time when I'm using Apple Vision Pro to hold the battery, but also to hold the secondary battery to charge the first battery. And I've also noticed that there's a fair number of similarities between cameras as like a personal electronics category and VR headsets, wherein, not all of our listeners would have had an SLR camera, but if you have an SLR camera, you've got this $1,000 or a couple $1,000 piece of hardware attached to another $1,000 piece of hardware, which is the lens. You need to protect that investment. That means a camera bag, number one, usually. But number two, like you tend to screw on a polarized filter onto the lens. That was always my experience when I owned an SLR. And the reason to do that is to never expose the core hardware lenses to a dust particle that can scratch the lens or become really difficult to remove or ruin a picture. Like my tendency whenever I've had a camera is to always screw on this lens filter and protect the core lens because it's like it's $50 or $20 to change the lens filter on it. It's hundreds of dollars to repair the lens. But the truth there is a little bit deeper that if there's a single speck on the camera lens, I'm out money potentially if I'm like a photojournalist or a professional photographer. Suddenly my photos are ruined that I plan to take for the day. In a VR headset, it's very similar. And I find it fascinating that, like, in my opinion, even people who don't need prescription correction for their headsets should probably attach lenses to their headset's optics just to protect the core lenses of the system in the exact same way because it's sort of like if you get a headset on day 1, you take the little like plastic off of the lens protections and then you put the headset on and basically the headset never looks as clear as it did on day 1. Every single day, you're just like adding a little bit of grime and a little bit of dust or a little bit of scuffing to your headset's design. And it's quite literally like experiencing 40 years of like natural human aging regarding your eyesight in a couple of months. Suddenly, a few months later, and the picture that you're experiencing in your headset doesn't look anything like it did on day 1 just because there's been that much wear and tear on your eyes inside VR. Like, I'm talking about two things there that are just not standard operating procedure for people that own headsets these days. People don't typically store their headsets in shoulder bags, and people don't typically attach lenses to the optics unless they really need serious eye protection. Like they expect to use the headset so often that they're really going to need those lens protectors. I'm describing another layer of resistance in addition to what you said, battery power and weight being huge situations. that impede headset use. I think there's this also just you got to realize this is a product category where every bit of grime from all your facial oils, every time your eyelashes touch the lenses, every piece of dust, all of that becomes a degradation of your visual experience over time, and it has to be battled if you really want to use it. I already talked a couple times here over Vision Pro, but like I've got this expensive piece of hardware here, and uh I've kept the prescription lenses attached to it, not quite 24/7. There was a period where I removed them for someone else to try the headset, and then I lost one of the lenses in my office for, like, a week or 2. And just in that week or 2 of time of letting someone else try the headset and not attaching those lens covers, there's, like, just a little bit of haze that got introduced to my optical experience, and every time I put on the headset, there's just a little bit of degradation to my visual experience. So, very long-winded way of sort of nodding along with what you're saying that weight and battery are big problems, but I also just I needed space here to kind of point out that VR headsets are cameras for your eyes and they should be protected in the same way that you protect a camera like that. So that's my piece of advice for anyone out there that has got a Quest 3 or a Vision Pro or any of these other headsets. Protect those lenses like your life depends on it, because you're not going to use those headsets as soon as you start noticing that the visuals have gone down. Yeah, my original PlayStation got really that's one of the major reasons I stopped using the PlayStation, I think. If I really look back on it, the PlayStation was out on the floor or out on the shelf a lot of the time, and gosh, it collected dust the
Right,
worst of
yeah.
any of my headsets, so yeah.
It's interesting you say that actually, 'cause, as a creative, I suppose comparing Project Hail Mary and probably the way people are seeing it now is like as a film. Like, I was lucky enough to see it as a with my name scrawled all over it and some numbers and uh, on my laptop for sort of like trying to draw reference from some of the early rushes. To actually see it on the IMAX as they intended it to be, and to get that full experience on any of the cinema screens when you know that they so painstakingly work towards that one vision of how they wanted it to be viewed, and knowing that modern technology allows that on a lot of the projectors that we go to in the cinema. You just don't have that control in the quality of how people experience VR, whether their heads, you see people strapping a headset on and it wafting around in their faces.
Oh, yeah.
Like you say, like, probably their lenses all misted and scratched. So you don't have the same sort of control over the experience.
You're just described yeah, I love it, and I hadn't even thought about this angle, but it's like it requires the person at home to be the projectionist, right?
Yeah.
You've gotta have that kind of level of skill of knowing it's a little bit out of focus for this reason. Let's fix it in this way. I observed this at a recent jigsaw puzzling event where I was accompanying a developer who has a jigsaw game called Jigsaw Night, and he was going to where his fans are, or where he hopes his fans are, by going to this jigsaw puzzling event and introducing his game to these people who love jigsaw puzzling. They've got VR Villa is the name of this group that basically attends conferences everywhere and gives VR demos out to people at the conference. And essentially, I'm watching dozens of people try a Quest 3 for the first time. And again, these folks are like, it's a little blurry. And very quickly, I recognized that a lot of these people were not properly fitting in the outset of getting the headset really tight to their face. Several times over this weekend conference, I was able to really quickly help people by just saying, hey, can you hold the headset up tight to your eyes? Okay, let me ratchet up the back of the headset. Does it look clearer now? And they're like, yeah, sure. That's so much better. And realizing that, like, that's literally like a projectionist not getting the settings right for the experience you're about to have in the theater. That's one of the reasons I think Vision Pro is such a great product. And it's one of the reasons I'm wondering about Meta's sort of reformation of the market here is this realization that like $300 to $600 is probably not the price point of future headsets. Even though Meta spent a decade targeting every single device in this category of like, we want to achieve mass market consoles with a VR headset at $400. These things that I'm describing, getting projection right, getting this system to look right for your eyes, requires extra hardware and extra effort that doesn't really fit into that pricing category. And so then you've got this issue of like, oh well, if the headset is priced significantly more than that, what sort of market do I offer my developers? And what is the core use case of a device that isn't in that pricing category? And yeah, I can't wait to see what Meta produces in its next headset. Do you wear the periphery open on your headsets or do you keep it closed off most of the time?
I could keep it closed off actually most of the time, but actually saying that, it does depend on what I'm doing. So I was surprised that for me, like entertainment was the big thing on the Apple Vision Pro, and I do close it off. I do like to be like fully movied.
Yeah, same for me. And like the transport that happens there, which also leads me to then like, how often do you spend in mixed reality versus sort of going for full immersion? Do you like to leave the cameras on, or do you like to like sort of turn the dial and go to full, turn off mixed reality and stay fully immersed, or do you spend a majority of your time in mixed reality these days?
I probably fully immersed a lot of the time. I don't have anyone here around me if I'm using it, and my room's not looking that great, actually. I'm glad I got the camera off.
It's fascinating. It's another layer of replacing someone's whole reality where, like, we kind of need mixed reality as a transitional space to
Mm.
get fully immersed. But once you get the headset on and you're really situated, I do find myself very regularly like, I really want to turn the camera off so I can be in this experience. There's an experience, Banners and Bastions, I just played for like 3 hours the other night, all in one sitting. And the experience really only it takes maybe 30 or 40 degrees of your field of view, maybe 50 degrees of your field of view, maybe more if you're really leaning into it. But it's meant to be a mixed reality experience, and it works great with the ability to look around your environment. But I want to say I was maybe 30 or 45 minutes into my 3 hours, and I went into the settings and turned the camera off to just immerse myself in that space, and then spent the rest of my 3 hour session completely with this very plain background environment, but also completely focused on this game that's floating in front of me. And so 2.5 hours in full VR in a mixed reality game and following 30 minutes of mixed reality in a mixed reality game. I guess we should come back to Project Hail Mary. Are there moments of complete immersion that you're going to be able to play with in Project
Yeah,
Hail Mary?
I think we see it as a mechanic that we use. So I don't know if you see experienced the Infinite Inside, which was a mixed reality title that we did, which is like you have a plinth that you discover in your space, and you can move around the plinth in mixed reality, and you can find these mysterious puzzle pieces that then unlock the plinth, and then you travel inside the plinth to find more puzzle pieces. And that turning off and on is a really interesting mechanic, I think, for us to play with. The levels and degrees of mixed reality, I think, is something that is really interesting to play with, especially when you look at the emotional telling of a story or an emotional beat. So I think it's another tool that you can play with from a creative standpoint, and I think that's something we want to play with Project Hail Mary.
Is there anything else about your work at Maze Theory or with Project Hail Mary that you want the audience to know about right now?
This is another world that we want to immerse people in, and uh, I think the interesting thing about this world, so Peaky had that immersion of taking you into the 1920s and being in those environments and feeling part of that world. Very much want to do that with Hail Mary, but I think the difference with Hail Mary to the other experiences we've done is we want to create that connection between you and Rocky. And that's the thing I think we're really excited about, is looking at how we can make you feel like you're working alongside and cooperating together. Because that's the true essence of the film and spirit of the book. So Let's see if we succeed in that, huh?
Yeah, I love it. Are you still as passionate about this medium as you were, say, over a decade ago?
Yeah, I think more so. Like, it's not done me any financial good, but fulfilling wise, I think this medium's got a long way to go. Like, the words transmedia have resurfaced in present day, which I find quite amusing because they're always a bit of a sort of like, what does that mean? But I do think that the future holds some really interesting crossovers between all entertainment mediums that haven't actually yet been reached. And by that, I suppose what I mean is, what will entertainment look like in 10 years? We're attending immersive events more. You see more people going to real life VR experiences or immersive experiences where they experience sort of like some of the huge digital walls and a bit of mixed reality, a bit of VR. I think this medium's got a long way to go. And a lot of exciting opportunities. But, I still like making like 2D games. I still like dabbling in old mechanics, and remember, going back to the fun. And I think bringing those experiences into VR and entertainment into VR, I don't know. It still hasn't really. It's still got plenty of legs to, and a lot younger people than me around.
Yeah, I love it. You're echoing a lot of my feelings on this matter. When I launched my independent effort, I talked to Andrew Icke at Alchemy Labs and asked him to chart out for me when do we reach a billion users in VR, because that was the marker that sort of Mark Zuckerberg launched his whole effort with. We're going to get to a billion people. And he was putting it as, based on his estimates that I sort of piecing together from the comments he's making, is like maybe the 2040s is when we get to a billion people in VR. And it's a slow sort of stacking and slog between now and then of investment from a lot of different players to try to achieve the products that really are necessary for extended immersion. And so, yeah, I'm as dedicated to this as I was the first day I got hooked on it. It was 2012 when I tried the Oculus demo, and it was a duct tape demo back then. And I still believe this is something that's going to happen in the next little bit. But yeah, we need to get more battery life, less weight, and solve some of these other problems. Glad you brought up the Infinite Inside. That was a really beautiful experience. You have some other things that you worked on in this space as well. Are there any other projects that you want to mention that you've worked on?
Obviously, there's Doctor Who: The Edge of Time, which is still on. We're still seeing people coming and dipping into that world completely fresh. There's obviously Peaky Blinders, which again we saw a surge of people having just watched the ending of the present Peaky, and I believe there's a start of a new soon. We've got The Infinite Inside, which is the mixed reality puzzle game, which are really, it's quite ambient and I think very tactile and leans very much into sort of some of the mechanics we're looking at and that tactility around Project Hail Mary. And then we've worked with colleagues on Ancient Dungeons, which we publish on PlayStation VR 2. And then, of course, there's Thief, which I nearly forgot to mention, which is the most recent title and probably
Yeah, I was
one of my
looking at the
biggest.
page for Thief. I was waiting for you to get to it because that
Yeah.
one has dropped a that one is a big one, right?
Yeah. 'Cause we roll straight into the next thing. The Thief, again, that was an amazing opportunity. I obviously played the early Thieves, and it was at a time when everyone used to play the same video games because we were all, there weren't that many of them, and everything was new and fresh. And stealth always felt like very much a natural fit for VR, and also, being very present in the space. And the world of Thief is a really rich, magical world, and it just felt right when the opportunity came up. It just felt like the right thing to really get involved with and want to do. So yeah, we've been spending the last 2 years living in the world of Thief.
Can't wait to see what you do in the future. I'm super excited to visit the world of Project Hail Mary and to meet Rocky in there. I'm on the Project Hail Mary subreddit, and everyone is doing the thumbs down for
Yeah.
everything. And yeah, I hope to be giving Rocky a thumbs down, and amongst the several other things I hope to do in that experience.
Yeah, just definitely be able to give him a thumbs up and a thumbs down. and a jazz hands and a fist bump or a fist my bum.
I fist my bump. Amaze, amaze. All right. Well, thank you so much for the time, Russell, and we'll see you in the future.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you.